Imagine you were 5 years old and you trusted the neighbors next door and you would head over to them. They were teenagers. You guys would play football together and you'd learn and you'd look up to them as role models and you felt special because they would help you play football and to spend time with you. But one day they didn't have a football. And so they thought it would be really funny if they used you as the football. And they grabbed you and they threw you to the next teenager and to the next teenager. And you were terrified. And the worst thing happened that you thought would happen. One of them dropped you. And even worse, you hit your head on a stone and you ended up crying and going home probably with a severe concussion. But worse than that, you created internal beliefs about your own worthiness, about why would they do this? Like, why would they pick you? Why would they be so mean to you? You must have done something, right? Why would people be like that? So today I have an incredibly special guest with me, a dear friend of mine and colleague for over the past 10 years. And his name is Dr. Joe Rubino. And I'm so excited to have you here with us today, Joe. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your story and to help others find ways that they can find whatever challenges they had in their lives that have been holding them back. Now, just to let you know who Joe is, so Dr. Joe has been the founder, the CEO of the Center for Personal Reinvention for, what is it now, Joe, over like a decade?
31 years.
30, oh my gosh, 31 years. Incredible.
Yeah.
So 31 years ago is when you finally came to the conclusion of how you were going to take control of your life, but even a step further, how you were going to help others do that. So I would love to dive right in, Joe, and talk about that time and what it meant and what it did and how other people, even if we don't remember a trauma in our past, but we know we have self-issue, belief systems that are not serving us and not helping us realize our full potential. And also, one more thing I just want to mention before we dive into your story and how we can use these strategies to help empower our own lives. I just want to let you know, you, the viewer, that at the end of our interview today with Dr. Joe, he actually has given me a special gift to help you. And we're going to share how that you can actually get started right away with your first step to overcoming your feelings of not being enough, of not being worthy, so that you can actually achieve the success that you do deserve. All right, Joe, I'm going to head right over to you. Can you go back and just tell us that scenario? Like, did you often go and play with these boys, and like what actually happened that day?
Well, you summed it up pretty well, Amanda. Thank you for having me, by the way. And,
Aw.
I honestly don't remember going back there after that day. Perhaps I didn't, or maybe I know that my parents went over there and they kind of read them the riot act, and so they probably didn't want to play with me anymore after that.
Yeah.
But you're right. I made up that day that I was small and insignificant, and that people were mean and cruel, and the world was a dangerous place. And I decided that the way to protect myself was to become an extreme introvert. So I would walk down the street and see someone that I knew and put my head down and make off that I didn't see them. So I quickly developed a reputation of being a real big snob.
Oh.
And they probably thought, this guy thinks that he's better than everybody, and it was just the opposite. So, I thought that people hurt you, and so you got to stay away from them. And I didn't realize that I went into the practice of dentistry, probably for the same reasons, where you could talk to people and they couldn't talk back.
Yeah, fair enough. Oh my gosh, yeah, with all the things in their mouths, and you'd finally be in control, right?
So it wasn't until I was in my 30s that I attended a personal development seminar that was 4 days. And long story short, it turned into a year-long program, which then turned into a 10-year program.
Wow.
And during this time, I learned to coach. So I was on the phone every day for Monday through Friday for a half hour. And we met 16 days a year in a physical location. And so that transformed my life. And one of the questions that one of my coaches asked me during that period was, if money weren't an object, what would you do for a living? Would you continue to practice dentistry? And there's nothing wrong with dentistry. It's a great profession. But for me, there was no doubt. I said, no, I wouldn't. And what would you do? Well, I'd like to do what you're doing, inspiring people to change their lives. And he said, well, why can't you do that? And I said, well, because You don't know who I am. I just can't do that. I
Right.
can't speak. I can't write. I can't do much except for dentistry, right? So he said, that's a crock of baloney, and it was. And so I proceeded to reinvent myself. And so now I support other people to reinvent themselves to live their best lives, because if I could do it, then anybody can do it.
And that's the key, right? Like we all think that, well, other people can do it, but we can't do it. And like, why is it that we feel that way? Like, why do we feel that, we're not good enough? Other people are better than us.
Yeah. Well, we all make something up, early on in life, typically before the age of 6,
Right.
where something happens and we decide something about ourselves that doesn't serve us. And we decide something about other people that doesn't serve us, and something about the world that doesn't serve us. And so moving forward, we start to look at the world through colored glasses. And every time we enter into another upset, we take our history of upset and what we made up about ourselves and everyone else and all of that stuff, and we look at the world from a new perspective that doesn't serve us. And before you know it, there's no doubt in our minds that that's just the way we are, and there's nothing we can do about it. We were just we were dealt a bad hand, and that's just the way it is. So we have to try to survive in the world, and we do whatever we can do to survive. Some people, like me, hide out for years. Other people, lie and cheat and steal and rob banks. So it depends what your own survival strategy is.
And that's it, isn't it? It's a survival strategy, right?
It is.
Yeah.
It's we do the best we know how to do based upon how we see ourselves and others.
Yeah.
And like I said, the good news is that it can be reversed. And the better news is, if you're a parent and you have kids, you can teach them principles that will support them to grow up with healthy self-esteem, so that when the upsets happen, and they will happen, when the heat is on, they can make things up that support them, because you will have taught them that a number of principles. I've actually identified 31 core principles that when you teach children these principles, they grow up with soaring self-esteem.
Oh, wow.
So
oh, my gosh. Yeah, I'd love for you to touch on maybe one or two of them today. But let's just go back for a moment. And so when this happened to you, what because now you could go back and you can see what kind of self-esteem, mental attitude that you picked up. I can't think of the words right now, but you know what I mean, where like, what was the dialogue that you were telling yourself in that moment?
Well, I told myself that I was small and insignificant, and that I wasn't very special for people to treat me that way, and that they didn't like me, because, who would like me after all? They were justified in doing this, I guess, because they did it. And all this stuff was going through my head, that, I just wasn't good enough to be treated with respect. And as a result, what am I going to do now?
Right.
Because all I was doing was going to hang out with these people that I idolized. Like you mentioned, they were probably 16 to 18 years old. And they were the heroes of the neighborhood. All us little kids used to play football, and they were the quarterbacks. And, they would organize the game, and they teach us how to play football. And so this had never happened before. It was always a good experience. So I had no expectation that it was going to turn out this way. And so I decided that anybody could do this to you. If they could do it, anybody could do it, because they were my friends, I thought. But I guess I was wrong.
And I remember you telling me about that, about how it not only changed your thoughts about yourself and your own worthiness, but also these kids who you idolized, who you thought were great kids. I mean, they would spend time playing with you, so why wouldn't you think they're great kids? And then they do something so unexpected and so mean, and they probably laughed when you fell. Like, in that moment, that's probably what their natural reaction was. Like, instead of the empathy that you needed, or the support that you needed, and then it changed how you looked at other people.
Yeah.
That regardless if somebody was kind and nice, internally, you would expect at some point there was going to be a breaking point and they would become mean.
Yeah, you couldn't trust anyone. So I developed, trust issues at that point, where people lie to you, people mistreat you, and they hurt you. And that's what I made up at that time. Now, of course, looking back on that, not only do I see that they were just doing what teenagers do, just trying to have fun. And they didn't know what they were doing. They didn't want to hurt me, of course.
Yeah.
And I actually look back on that, and I'm so grateful to them for that day, because I wouldn't have been in, this whole line of work. I wouldn't have reinvented myself.
I know. What would we do? You wouldn't be here like this. It's awful to say, but I'm glad it happened to you so that you became the person you are. Obviously not because I want you to be hurt. Yeah. But isn't that incredible? Right? Yeah.
It was a gift.
I know. And I think that's one of the keys that you teach as well, is how we look at life. I remember you talking about focus, right? And how we tend to go into this focus. And I remember you telling a story about you would see somebody smoking. And I'd love for you to explain like what came into your mind before you noticed how we make decisions about things.
Yeah. Well, of course, when I was this little kid, my automatic response was, that's not fair. You can't do that. How dare you? And I would be indignantly angry. So indignant anger was my go-to emotional reactive mood. It wouldn't take much to really tick me off and help me become indignantly angry. So like you say, somebody would be smoking, in a restaurant, and I'd be indignantly angry. How dare you do that? Don't you know secondhand smoke can kill people, and you have no respect for people and all that. Okay. So somebody, takes a sharp right in front of me, they cut me off in traffic, and of course they're, the devil, because they don't care about people, and they turn into the teenagers that tossed me around,
right?
When I was a little kid.
And that's
everyone turned into that, model, because that's how I saw the world. So
exactly. So it didn't matter what the situation was; it would revert you right back. But you wouldn't consciously know that. But at that subconscious level, you were right back in that. How dare they? Don't they know I deserve more? Like, how dare they?
Yeah, I was an upset waiting to happen.
Yeah. And then I love how you mentioned how you went into dentistry. I'm sure you loved helping people with their teeth, but how you noticed later on that you subconsciously chose to become a dentist because they couldn't talk back to you. They couldn't be mean. You could physically be above and in control of like one of the tools that they would use the most. They would be powerless, even though you were helping them. I mean, obviously you were an amazing dentist because you're just that kind of guy, but to see that side of yourself, knowing I was protecting myself. I was putting myself
totally
in
invisible.
Right.
I that I chose that profession for that reason.
Yeah. You were protecting yourself. You were putting yourself in that position so that you could help others and they couldn't hurt you.
Right.
Yeah. Incredible.
Funny how the mind works.
Right. And also that you said that you became, severely introverted because of all of this as well.
Yeah.
And that I think it was you and your business partner at the time, you were invited to this personal development course. And both of you were introverts, and you both were kind of like, well, we don't want to go, but if we go together, maybe it won't be so bad. And how that moment actually changed your life. I'd love you to touch on that, because I think that is so inspiring.
Well, you're right. We were invited to go to this personal development course, and we both said, oh, we don't do personal development. It's too dangerous. It hurt.
Yeah.
You get tossed around on personal development. So long story short, we decided, okay, after this person kept inviting us, and we liked this person, and we were working with them in other capacities. Yep. And so we went basically to have them stop inviting us. Another dentist. And so we went with the idea that, we'll just sit through it, and, we'll just go to lunch, and we won't pay too much attention to it. And what we didn't know was that it was, something that we desperately needed and desperately wanted, although we didn't know that we wanted it at the time. And it was life-changing.
Incredible. And it actually spiraled you into this new, direction in life.
Yeah.
Where it changed from being in this protective mode to being in this adventurous, let me stretch outside my comfort zone and see what I can accomplish. And then you became this world famous Dr. Joe Rubino, changing people's lives, right? And that wouldn't have happened.
Well, what changed was I realized that I was more committed to something that would motivate me to get out of my comfort zone than my comfort. Right. Because we're all committed to something, and most of us are committed to our comfort. So the reason I didn't want to go was because bad things can happen in unknown situations, and I found out that early on in life. But what I didn't realize is what it was costing me to stay playing small and being protected,
Right.
in terms of relationships, fun, happiness, potential, not to mention sharing any gifts, which I didn't even know that I had to develop and then share with others. So
Yeah.
it was when I realized what it was costing me, that was the turning point where I knew that I had to risk, because I couldn't continue doing what I was doing because I was the living dead, basically.
Well, and that mentor of yours to actually, be that direct with you and say, is this what you want to continue doing, dentistry? Or if you had a choice, if you could do anything, would that still be that thing?
Yeah, well, he was
Right?
a great coach, and that's what coaches do. They
Mm.
help us to see the areas that we don't know about ourselves, the areas that we're blind to. And they ask insightful questions where we have the answers, but we don't always know what questions to ask. And so that question had me really ponder what course I was on, and is that the kind of course I wanted to stay for the rest of my life?
Right.
Really protecting myself as opposed to living full out and playing the master game, which is part of declaring a life purpose and living that life purpose, as opposed to just trying not to get hurt day to day,
Right.
which is a
And maybe just
way to look at
dreaming,
it.
but not actually going after, right? Because that'd be scary.
Exactly.
So, as a coach, let's give it just a feeling, because I know a lot of the people on my channel, they are families, they've got kids. And if we can work with children, obviously we can already change a generation as they grow up. And so there are two aspects I want you to focus on. One is, as a parent, if your child goes through something traumatic, what are some tools that you could do? Maybe you can give an example of how to change that perspective for them.
Yep.
We'll talk about that one first, and I'll ask you the next one.
Okay. Well, there's a couple of foundational principles. I mentioned to you that I identified 31 important principles, and there's lots of others that are important too, but not as crucial. So one of them is to recognize your emotional reactive mood and the interpretations that you create that throw you into that mood. So let me explain. When you're early on in life, usually before the age of 6, like my situation, something happens to a child where everything is going along fine, and then abruptly, for some kids it happens much earlier in the womb or shortly thereafter, and for others it happens later on in life, but everybody experiences some upset.
Right.
Not everyone can remember that initial upset, but if you can, you will look at that upset and you'll realize that someone said or did something, and you made up something or bought into somebody else's negativity about that event, where you decided something that didn't serve you about yourself and about other people and about the world. So you collapsed or mistakenly decided that they were facts that threw you into a tizzy.
Right.
Instead of that you made something up, so that you interpreted what you thought were facts in a way that didn't serve you. So I interpreted the fact that these kids tossed me around, and the fact was I hit my head and got hurt, but the interpretation was that it was because I was not good enough, because they didn't like me, because there was something deficient or defective about me, and that was the lie. Yeah. So if you can help your children, for example, to identify their predominant reactive emotional state, and there are 4 typically. And so this is the first component of having them wake up and see that when they recognize this state, then they can start to analyze what happened and they can make some sense of it. So the 4 most common are anger, sadness, fear, and anxiety. Okay. Now, it's easy to see why people would go to anger, because it allows us to be forceful, dominate others, avoid being controlled by them. We get to be powerful in that moment.
Feel like we're in control in some way. Yeah.
We are, and it gives us this false sense of power. If we can be angry, it gives us the impetus to do something we wouldn't do outside of being angry. And the problem is the advantages of what we can accomplish while we're angry are short-lived. Force is not nearly as productive as as a more reasonable, rational approach to dealing with the situation. So when we act out of anger, it creates dead bodies along the road. People don't like being around angry people, and we begin to attract other angry people into our lives because energies attract similar energies. Now, for a lot of people, they stuffed the anger, they became sad. There's statistics that show something like 350 million people are addicted to sadness. These are people who show signs of clinical depression. Their brain chemistry actually changes, so it's a very real thing. But in the bottom line is, if you dissect what happened and you trace their progression through childhood, you'll see that something happened that made them sad. They actually made themselves sad because of the interpretation that they created, and then they gravitated toward those sorts of interpretations that created sadness. Why? Because it made them a victim. They get to feel sorry for themselves. They get to avoid responsibility for being happy. Right. They get to evoke with other people. They get all these contrary benefits, and it becomes a habit. It becomes an emotional crutch where, oh, I'm sad, so I don't have to do anything. I can feel sorry for myself and not, poor, pitiful me, right? So the third type of emotional reactive state is fear. 24% of women and 16% of men are addicted to fear. And these are people who put themselves in dangerous situations all the time, whether that's an abusive relationship or living in a dangerous part of the world or picking a job where they're one step out the door, or living paycheck to paycheck, some way that they get to be afraid all the time. They don't like being afraid, but again, they get to be a victim. They get to avoid responsibility somehow for managing that state. Okay. Then anxiety is the last of the most common ones. It is about 264 million people who have some chronic anxiety, either general anxiety or social anxiety or some specific anxiety. And again, these all run their lives. So here's the exercise. Okay. You can do with your children. You sit down with them and you ask them, okay, these are the 4 typical reactive states. We're going to keep a note, a journal. Every time you're in an upset, every time you get mad or afraid or fearful or anxious, you're going to write down a note. What happened? What are the facts? And you're going to teach your children to separate out the facts from their interpretations. So the facts are Mary said blah, 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 or Susie did so and such and such. And you're going to ask them, okay, so how did that make you feel? Angry. What kind of anger? For me, it was indignant anger. It could be raging anger. It could be resigned anger. There's so many different flavors, and the more you can identify it, the easier it is to recognize. Or it could be sadness. What type of sadness? It could be depression. It could be resignation. It could be some sort of fear, abject fear, or it could be just nervousness. You have to recognize what is the most common emotional response whenever the heat is on, whenever you're in this upset mode. So you recognize, you write that down. When you're in that mode, let's look at what happened. What are the facts? Who said what? And what did you buy into or interpret about what they said? Now, Susie could have said, you're ugly and you smell funny. Okay? And so you could say, that's what she said, that you're ugly and you smell funny. Well, that's what she said. And so now we have to look further. Well, what do you think it's like in Susie's world to have her say something like that? You think that she was angry or, someone maybe have picked on her? So remember that 99% of the time an upset happens, it's about the person who's upset. And only 1% is about the actual person who's causing the upset. Right. So in the time of this upset where someone calls you a name, you can say, okay, what is it like in that person's world to have them do such a thing? Okay. And you try it on. So, if someone tells me that I smell funny, well, have I taken a bath recently? How's my hygiene? If there's something missing, then I take a bath, okay? Yeah. If not, then I say, well, that upset is about the other person. It's not about me. I just took a bath, okay, in this example. Yeah. So what we're saying here is that if the upset is identified with the other person and it's not legitimately something that you provoked, then let that upset stay with that other person. You don't have to buy into that upset. So the question that you can ask your child is, okay, are you willing to create an interpretation that keeps you free of upset? In relationship, hopefully, with the other person, but not attached to what they say or do. So by teaching your child this exercise, you're going in the time of an upset to have them feel like they're 10 feet tall and bulletproof because nobody can pull their strings or press their buttons. So they're going to create a new interpretation, maybe that Susie had a bad day, or that, Johnny was picked on by somebody else and he was just trying to feel good about himself because, he was bullied, so he's bullying somebody else.
Right.
Whatever it is that you can make up in that moment, and it's going to feel a little bit awkward because there's no emotional charge to it, whereas there was a charge to whatever you made up that gave you your mood of anger or sadness or fear or anxiety. So the new interpretation is going to be mood-free. And you're going to assume that because of the fact that you're going to be committed to not being at the effect of this chronic state.
Exactly.
Then you're going to ask yourself, what action can I take to support me now? So maybe you're going to say something that is nice to the other person, like, well, maybe I do smell funny. I guess I'll have to take a bath. Or I'm just saying something that diffuses the situation. Or you know what? If somebody's chronically like that, maybe you need to teach them that you aren't the sort of punching bag that has to hang around a bully. Okay?
Right.
And so thanks for sharing. I guess I won't be hanging around you too much because you know what? I deserve better than that. So we get to train people how they are to be with us. So if you can support your kids to go through this exercise of identifying the facts, separating out the interpretations, identify the emotional response, giving up your right to feel that. That's the important part because oftentimes you want to be angry. So are you willing to give up your right to be angry or sad or afraid or anxious? Because there's so many contrary emotional benefits. As we mentioned, when you're angry, you get to be forceful. You get to tell somebody off and be offended or whatever it is. So if you're willing to give it up, then you can create the new interpretation out of being in development. So one of the tools that this is all based upon is that life is a process where we learn and grow, and we're all in development. So during times of upset, here's one tool that we're going to use. And it kind of segues into a second tool, which is learning what you're committed to. So an exercise that we do with children is let's list all of the qualities that we want to be known for. Being happy, being a contributor, being funny, being a great friend, whatever those qualities are. And what are the qualities that we don't want to be, that we find ourselves gravitating towards sometimes when there's an upset going on.
Right.
So, getting back at people, being vengeful, hurting other people, hiding out, whatever that is. So we identify a fork in the road as we're walking down life, and we get to choose the path of heart, which is all the qualities that we want to be committed to, and we want to avoid the qualities that don't serve us. Right. So when we can teach children to identify what they're committed to, the next question is, does that interpretation serve or honor your commitment? Right. And it's easy for a child to see, okay, being angry doesn't serve me. If I want to be happy, and being angry doesn't serve that commitment. If I want to be a good friend, then getting them back doesn't serve that commitment. So that is a valuable tool because as children learn what they're committed to, they also can make good decisions. Why do kids that fall in with bad crowds do drugs, smoke, do all the things that they shouldn't do, drink, whatever it is as a child, right?
Yeah.
It's because they haven't clarified what they're committed to. So as a parent, if you can share with them, okay, let's identify the things that you're committed to and the things that you're committed not to being, so that they have a heads up so that when they come up with the question, hey, you want to go get high? That's easy. We already had this conversation. I know that I'm committed to being healthy, not a drug addict, not being, going down that road. So it allows kids to honor themselves by clarifying what they're up to in life. And as you build on these 31 different principles, you build wise, really spiritually evolved people who are not just ego-based, but about contributing something to others and to the world, and to evaluating who they're being moment by moment that serves them.
Exactly. So yeah, and that resonated so much. There's so many points in there that just were like click, 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 click. And I know you've got 30 other points. Before I ask you the second question, where can we go to find? Because I know you help children raise their self-esteem, but you also help adults raise their self-esteem. So, and everything that you just mentioned about children, we can totally, feel for ourselves as well, is figuring out the different categories and what we want to pursue. So where would we best find you for help?
Well, there's two courses that I created. www.selfesteemkids.com is the program that is the course to be able to teach children these 31 core principles. And selfesteemadults.com is the course for personal reinvention, where we all can elevate our own self-esteem. And there's an optional certification component to both of these courses. So if you are so inclined and you'd like to learn these, not only for yourself, but to teach other people, you could be certified by the Center for Personal Reinvention. And we've had many colleges ask us to contribute these courses to their curriculum. So it's something that's definitely missing from the school curriculum, I think. And High Self-Esteem Kids, highselfesteemadults.com. You'll learn about these courses. And my vision is to actually contribute to the lives of 20 million children and 20 million adults. And I call these people our team of light bearers. So if this sort of thing resonates with you, I'd invite you to check out these courses and join our team, because the only way that I'm going to reach my vision of impacting that many people is if you all impact people and they impact people, and it just continues to grow that way.
And that's one of the reasons I wanted to invite you to be on my channel and to share this with everyone, is because I know it will help, like the strategies that you teach help raise and elevate your own self-esteem, but I also help so many people turn their passions into passive income and teach them how to have online businesses. And this is something you could do if you don't yet know what it is. You want to create some sort of positive impact in the world, then this is a great place. You learn to build your own self-esteem first, and then you learn how to become a coach so you can then help others. So it's such a perfect thing. I'm actually going to have to cut this Zoom call short because it's giving me the countdown timer. So what I'm going to do though is Joe and I are going to actually hop on a private Skype call, but I'm going to record the answer to the second question. And the second question is, what if you can't remember a childhood trauma, but you have a lot of blocks in the way? So Joe, you can think about that. We'll hop over onto Skype and I'm going to record just your answer, and then I'll add that to this video for all of you guys watching. And so we'll see you in like a couple seconds. Well, thank you, Joe, for hopping on private call with me. So I had that quick question. I know a lot of people, and I know people in my personal life as well, who I'll talk to them about what you've taught me, about, look back, were there moments where you created this idea about yourself? What are they? And a couple of them really struggle to figure out. They're like, I honestly can't think of anything. And I don't know if it's because they've blocked it out because it was too painful for their conscious mind to want to retain, or if something specific didn't happen, but it was like a general thing that just over time, maybe it's the society or the family that created those feelings. So if you could dive in and give me a little insight, I know that would help so many people.
Well, sure. Like you say, so many people can't remember that early childhood upset. And it doesn't matter, because we literally have relived the same upset hundreds or thousands or hundreds of thousands of times, depending upon the level of upset that we involve in our lives. So all we have to do is look at yesterday, what happened in the upset with your spouse, or what happened with that coworker who you got into the argument with, or your neighbor along the fence did last week. It doesn't matter what the upset was, but if you do that same example, that same exercise,
Right.
where you separate out what happened, what did you make up about what happened that gave you your mood? Is your mood a form of anger, sadness, fear, anxiety, or something else? And what new interpretation can you create if you're willing to give up your right to be right and your right in your mood? Because you could be right or you could be happy, but you can't be both. And so that's an important thing to teach children as well. You could be right or you could be happy, but you can't be both. So you get to decide, are you going to be right or what is it going to be? So take that recent upset and then journal it.
Right.
What happened? What did you make up about yourself and the other person and about the world? Are you willing to give up your right to be a victim? Are you willing to give up your right to be right? Are you willing to create a new interpretation that serves you and the relationship? Now, when I say that, it doesn't mean that you have to keep the relationship. So you could be in a chronic upset state with an abuser. Doesn't mean that you have to stay in that relationship. You have to do whatever serves you the best. Sometimes talking to the person and letting them know what you're going to be allowing and not allowing is going to teach them how they are to treat you. But there are some people that you won't want to continue to be in a relationship with because they're not in development and they're not prepared to treat you with respect. So if you can do this exercise and then take some action, the action is the critical component to moving your life forward, because the action is 180 degrees opposite of what you ordinarily would do to protect yourself. If you listen to your negative self-talker on your shoulder. So you're going to take some action that keeps you in relationship if possible, or serves your happiness, serves your self-esteem, serves your ability to move forward, complete with that episode of just what happened, and then have a happy life moving forward. What did you learn from that? Who are you being that showed up around you? And what was missing that if put in place would serve you in the next time that a similar happening shows up?
Yeah. And I know a lot of the time, like what you said, you can either be right or you can be happy. And that is something that totally is so hard to let go of, because you're like, I for example, if somebody's like, but they really did this awful thing. And it's like, we're not saying that they didn't. We're saying, how are you going to go forward? Like, do they deserve to have you have all this energy around it? Or do they deserve to just maybe be let go of? You're not, and I know that's a big thing when people think about, forgiving. You're not forgiving their actions. You're forgiving that it happened and then that you internalized it a certain way. You're releasing it. So I love how you help see it in that perspective.
Yeah, I like to look at forgiving as thank you for giving me the
Yes.
experience to learn and to grow.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Every experience is a contribution if you're in development.
Yeah.
And every upset is a learning experience that can lead to peace and harmony. So, anything that someone does, we're not condoning bad behavior, but we're just saying you don't have to be sucked into that bad behavior.
Exactly.
Let them be the miserable person that they want to be, and you can be the happy person who just rolls off your back, doesn't affect you at all, because you know better. You know that, the venom just creates more venom, and you deserve to be happy. So let the upset stay with the person who's upset, and try it on like a coat, move on, and do whatever it takes to learn and to grow from the experience.
Yeah. And I've noticed as well, and you've definitely helped me see it from this perspective, that half the battle is just being able to see the situation outside of being in the moment. Because once we're aware of it, even if we don't make the right choices that help us in that moment, or maybe it takes years, but once we are aware of it, we can't no longer not be aware of it. So now your conscience is constantly, nagging at you going, okay, pay attention. What did you do here? What did they do here? Like it's just always there. Once we know something, it's really hard to unknow it. And so being aware of the situation and what you do with that process of dividing it into those 4 categories of what kind of emotion, and just seeing it from that perspective is so helpful. So thank you for that. I know that you also have, and we'll put the links to these in the description of the video for everyone here to enjoy. But I really appreciate that you're giving a couple of free gifts. I believe it's one for the adult, or one for the adults and one for the children. Am I right? You can share and explain what they are.
Sure. Well, the gift that I'm going to talk about that is just a new gift that you don't even know about yet.
Oh wow! I'm excited.
7-step Soaring Self-Esteem, and it's a mini course that comes along with an audio program, and each lesson is accompanied by an exercise, and the exercise helps you to map on the principle onto your life to see, so that you can become that principle. That's how we learn and grow. So if you go to selfesteemsystem.com, you will get access to that gift.
Perfect.
And there's 2 other gifts that you'll have links to. And one is a brain entrainment miracle gift, which is a program. We found that when we combine brain entrainment technology to work on our subconscious while we have personal development to work on our consciousness, it's the greatest combination for the fastest results. So the one gift is the brain entrainment miracle, which is going to show you all the scientific background about how that really works. And the second gift is a personal development gift, which was a 90-minute, I think it was 90 minutes, might have been 60, but it was a video that I did for public television.
Oh, okay.
And it goes into much more detail about self-esteem elevation and working with children and adults to live your best life.
I really appreciate that. Thank you for doing that. I asked Joe, is there something special that we can give just my viewers? And so I really appreciate that. And I'm really excited about the brainwave entrainment one, the combination. I've done some research on it myself, and maybe if you're watching this right now, you're not sure what that is. Joe, would you mind just sharing a little bit of how it works? Because I know it's like patterns in your brain matching up with the different levels of subconsciousness, but I'll let you explain that a little bit.
Yeah, it's a new technology that uses, I'm not going to get into all the scientific how it works, but basically it takes sounds and waves and subliminal suggestions and combine those 3 elements so that you listen to it with headphones and you'll hear an echo and it sound kind of weird, and you'll hear people talking in the background of music. It doesn't matter. It's because your brain is being is shifted. You're reinventing your brain to heal the negative trauma that you've gone through, so that when you combine that with the personal development, where the conscious stuff that you're consciously working with, it's kind of like working in the awake state and in the dream state almost at the same time, where we're getting the 1-2 punch of, doing what you know you can do and having someone in the background supporting you even when you're unconscious of what you're doing. So it's a great combination.
Oh, and that is a perfect explanation of how it works. Yeah, and those noises, they actually help kind of settle your conscious mind to stop paying so much attention, so your subconscious can have some good effect and create those positive neural connections. So yeah, that's amazing, and I'm so excited. So I will put those links in the description below for you, and yeah, our gift from Joe. Thank you, Dr. Joe Rubino, for coming by today. And so one last message: how can we take that first step to helping raise our own self-esteem?
Well, my suggestion is to do something every single day that's going to move you forward along the path of heart, the path that leads toward the person you decided to be, the person that honors those core values that are most important to you, that really aligns with the vision of creating your dream life. So my suggestion is to start with the free gifts. See if those resonate with you. Mm-hmm. If they do, great. You'll have some exercises to do and some homework, and do something every single day, whether that's getting to work with a coach, whether that's taking a personal development program, whether that's listening to someone who's great like yourself, supporting children to change their lives. Do something that's going to put you on the path of positivity, moving your life forward, because you have two choices. You could either be growing or you could be sliding down that hill of silent decay without knowing. And that's where most people live their lives. If you look at the state of the world today, you'll see it's because people don't have hope. They don't believe in themselves. They don't believe in their inevitable success and happiness. So they have to depend upon other people to give them everything because they don't feel capable of earning it themselves. And that makes them angry. It makes them sad. It makes them anxious. All the things that we've been talking about. So my challenge is, don't let this just be maybe an interesting half hour or so. Let it be the start of a new habit that you're going to create in your life daily to move your life forward. And God bless and thanks for your attention.
Thank you. I so appreciate this. And on the screen right now, I've got a link that you can click on. It'll go straight to Joe's gift. So go ahead and click on that. And I hope that that is helpful. Thank you again, Joe, for being here with us, and sending you hugs and love.
Thank you, Amanda, for the great work you do. And thank you, everyone.
Okay.